Kurt, you rode his thoroughbred all day. It's only fair that he rides yours tonight, she said, turned and left the bedroom. What the heck, I said to myself. My thoughts returned to the events of the last day. It all started with a trip to business owner Audra's home in Rolling Hills, California. Audra was excited but a little worried. It was the first time her boss, company owner Chet Haverson, invited his company's department heads to his home. We were supposed to stay until Sunday evening and then return to our apartment in Los Angeles. As I thought about the trip, I wondered if it was already planned. There may not have been specific plans, but perhaps hints were made. If my anger wasn't already at a high level due to her leaving after such a statement, it would definitely have increased after these thoughts. I continued to remember last night and the events of today. We arrived in a prestigious gated community in Los Angeles, where many celebrities and very rich people live. On the way to one of the most impressive estates, we were greeted by a guard. The estate itself made a huge impression on us with its scale. I'm sure Audra was amazed by what she saw too. As I knew, the house was a luxurious two-story Italian-style mansion with an area of about 930 square meters. I knew that Audra's company was multinational, but I had no idea that it was large enough to allow its owner to have such an impressive residence, especially in this exclusive area. When he met us at the door, he was pleasant enough, but with a hint of pretense lurking beneath the surface. By 7, as all the department heads were there. Audra is the Director of Human Resources. I was proud of her achievements. At 29, she had already been an HR executive at 3 different companies, including a recent promotion to director at this company. There were 4 other couples there. The dinner was filled with interesting conversations and, of course, some talk about work. I felt a little out of place. As an industrial engineer, I spend most of my day working on projects either alone or with a small group of people. I think I held up pretty well. I'm a nerd, but not socially awkward. That night, in our own suite, we made love. Afterwards, we hugged and fell asleep with smiles on our faces. I woke up early and lay looking at my beautiful wife. We met at Starbucks. She grabbed her latte from the barista and quickly turned around to run straight into me. Of course, the lid came off the cup and hot coffee spilled onto my chest. Damn, that was hot. I inhaled sharply, stepped back, and pulled my shirt away from my chest. I didn't even look at the woman who hurt me. I looked at my shirt. Damn, now I need to buy a new shirt, I thought. Audra was extremely apologetic when I looked up at her. I'm really sorry. Are you okay? What can I do? She hesitated, and our eyes met. I can't say it was love at first sight. I'm logical enough to know that wasn't possible, but I felt an instant attraction and connection with this woman as she fussed around not knowing what to do. Can I pay for cleaning or buy you a new one if this one doesn't clean up? She asked apologetically. I replied, don't worry about it. This is an old shirt. It's probably already outlived its useful life. Yes, I thought I was clever. This forced her to laugh. Well, that was 5 years ago. We dated for a couple of years and then got married. After we showered and got dressed, we headed to the dining room where a buffet breakfast was served. We took our plates and sat down to eat. We were almost done when Chet came in from his barn, dressed for the ride. So everyone has the opportunity to ride horses on trails in the community. I'll be able to show you the houses of some of my more famous friends and neighbors. Rolling Hills is an equestrian community. Many residents have horses, and there are trails throughout the community and surrounding hills. We will use these paths. I grew up in the Midwest, and we had horses on our farm. I was pretty confident with horses. In fact, I was a member of 4-H and even competed in my early teens. I smiled remembering the good times on my horse. I've been looking forward to riding again since almost a decade has passed. Chet continued to say, I have horses that are suitable for beginner riders and horses that need experienced riders. Let's go to the barn and we'll match you with horses based on your experience. I was very impressed with his barn and the quality of his horses and tack. Since we have such a large group, I borrowed a few horses from some of my neighbors. I assure you that they are all quality animals and you have nothing to fear, he said, as if we were all inexperienced townspeople. I was annoyed by his complacency, and I said, "I'd like to ride that thoroughbred." I walked up to the magnificent animal standing proudly in his stall. She wasn't even equipped to ride. "Hey," Chet said, "Brandy is a temperamental animal. I don't think she would suit anyone here." I opened the stall and approached the horse so that he felt safe, but knew that I was an experienced rider. She didn't even flinch, feeling my confidence. Chet noticed this, and with a smirk on his face said, "If you're really determined to ride Brandy, I should warn you that I'm not responsible if she dumps you." I could tell he was trying to scare me and show others that he is in charge. Audra then said, "Kurt, maybe you should listen to Chet and choose another horse that he can pick for you." I know my male ego was hurt by what she said. This showed a lack of confidence in her husband. She saw photographs and even trophies of my riding achievements. Why did she doubt my abilities? "No, I'm sure Brandy and I will do just fine," I said. Chet grinned again and ordered his groom to bring the ammunition for Brandy. I helped him while he put it on. She felt a little nervous around him. I wondered how he treated her. As we all saddled up, Chet said, "We'll be walking along the trails, and I'll be pointing out the houses of some famous people. Then we will return to the house for lunch." We probably spent at least 2 hours walking around the community as he introduced us to the important neighbors. I pretended to be interested, making Brandy feel more comfortable with my riding style, and I became more confident in how she responded. I couldn't wait to let her run. Finally, as Audra and I rode side by side, we came to a section of hills that had been left undeveloped so that owners could enjoy time on their horses. Galloping over the hills, I turned to Audra and said, "Let's speed up and let these majestic animals show us what they can do." "Kurt, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Let's stay with the group. This is right." "Audra, are you going to quarter horse? One of the most stable and balanced horse breeds. You have to trust your horse. She knows what to do." "I don't want to take any chances," she said. At that moment, Chet rode up to us on his horse and said, "We'll go back to the house now. I think we've ridden enough for today." I was hoping to let this wonderful horse run around a bit. Could we spend a little more time in the open? "Well, Kurt, you do look confident in the saddle, but most of us are inexperienced. I wouldn't want anyone's overconfidence to lead to injury." I heard a condescending tone in his voice. He understood that I knew how to drive, but in his eyes I was a simple nerd. He challenged me. I decided to play on his stupidity. "It's quite normal. Audra thinks it's better to stay with the crowd. I wouldn't want anyone to feel inferior because of their lack of experience." Yes, I teasing him. He may own these horses and sometimes ride them, but he is not a rider. He kept them as a status symbol for his neighbors. I noticed for a moment a look of contempt on his face. "Well, let's get some lunch, and then maybe you and I can come back here and let these animals run around." I didn't like how he called horses animals. He spoke of them as stupid creatures. We talked during lunch. The others discussed the houses and celebrities they had met. I saw Chet's chest puffed up with pride with every compliment or comment. After lunch, we sat on the large terrace and discussed various topics. I listened with half an ear. My thoughts were about getting back there and galloping through the hills. As several guests began to excuse themselves to change out of their dirty, sweaty clothes, Chet said, "So, Kurt, do you still think you can handle it? Brandy in open areas?" I knew he was trying to get me to give up, and I think Audra sensed it too. "Darling," she said, "let's just relax here and talk to the others." She tried to keep me from doing anything that would make my boss look bad. But I didn't like his condescending attitude, like he was better than everyone else. I said, "I'd love to go for a ride, but I don't want to tear you away from your guests." Now I either challenged him or gave him the opportunity to refuse. I could see he wanted me to fail, so he said, "They'll find something to do for a couple of hours. Let's see what you can do." As I stood up to go back to the barn, Audra looked at me with a "don't screw it up" expression. She clearly didn't want me to do anything that would cause her boss to look bad. During the ride, I could see that he was trying to show off his riding skills. However, I could also see that he knew I could handle it. We took the horses, my thoroughbred and his quarter horse, into an open field and let them run around. I merged with Brandy. She was great. I lost all sense of time. As we slowed down and climbed one of the hills, I looked back and saw that the edge was at least a quarter-mile behind me. We stopped at the top of the hill and waited for Chet to catch up. I could tell he was annoyed. He didn't tell me anything. We continued the ride, and I let Chet lead, more for his ego than because I didn't know all the trails. All too soon, we were back at his house. I directed Brandy straight into the barn and into her stall. Chet dismounted from his horse at the barn entrance and said, "I have to check on my guests." His tone made it clear to me that I was no longer a welcome guest. I spent an hour removing Brandy's gear and thoroughly polishing her. I missed this. Growing up around horses was a great experience. As I walked toward the house, I saw Chet talking to Audra. He was very close to her, and I didn't like it. She turned and looked at me. She looked nervous and a little angry. I walked up to her, and she said, "You smell. Go take a shower and change your clothes for dinner." Well, that was a great greeting. She must have been really angry. I went to our room and decided to shave, take a shower, and get dressed for dinner. I needed to win her back. When I came out to join the group, they were all sitting on the terrace. Chet and Audra were deep in conversation. When I approached them, they stopped talking and Audra looked guilty. I wonder what they were talking about, I thought. Dinner was nice, but Audra was more detached. She avoided eye contact with me. It was almost 9 hours old by the time we finished our meal, dessert, and after-dinner drinks. We headed to our room, Audra barely saying a word. Then, when she closed the door, she went to the bathroom with her overnight bag. I heard her taking a shower. She spent 15 minutes in the shower and what seemed like an eternity after showering doing something in the bathroom. By this time, I had already undressed and went to bed. When she finally came out, she was wearing a negligee that I bought for her on one of our trips. She looked great, and I thought the cold night would actually turn into a chance to right my wrongs and make amends to her boss. Then she put on her robe, turned to me and said, "Kurt, I'm spending the night with Chet." I was stunned. I stared at her at a loss. Then I found my voice. "What? Did you hear me? I'll spend the night with Chet." "What the hell? Is it a joke?" "No. I'm drawn to him, and he asked me." "You are the director of human resources. You know how wrong this is. It's one night. You will get through this. You do this, and we'll be done." "Oh, stop it, Kurt. This won't affect us." "You must be joking. I can't believe you're even talking about this." "You don't own me," she said. A classic phrase from every woman who wants to do something wrong, knowing it. "You do this, and you can forget about our marriage," I shouted. Then she said a phrase that I'm sure Chet planted in her mind. "Kurt, you rode his thoroughbred all day. It's only fair that he rides yours tonight." And then she left. I was sitting on the bed. I knew I should have run after her, but the fact that she thought she could do it, and I would just let her and then accept her back was incredible. She could go to hell. I got up and started walking around the bedroom. I approached her side of the bed. Something caught my eye at her bedside table. There was her wedding ring and engagement ring, the rings I put on her finger when we said our vows. I took off the ring from his finger and looked at it. I squeezed it tightly in my left hand, raised my fist above my head, and sharply hit the nightstand with my open palm. Her rings jumped as I quickly pulled my hand away, rubbing my palm with my right thumb. "Damn, this hurts." I looked at my hand. There was a red ring imprint on the palm. Then something happened. It was like a fuse had blown in Kurt's brain. Kurt's emotions disappeared. He unceremoniously packed his clothes and toiletries into his overnight bag and walked out of the bedroom without even looking back. Kurt walked through the house, overnight bag in hand, out the side door and into the car. He drove through the community and out the gate, waving to a security guard as he passed. The drive home was uneventful, with traffic lights for a Saturday night. He absent-mindedly rubbed his palm all the way home. If he had looked at his palm, he would have seen that a bruise had formed on it. About an hour later, he was home in his apartment. He entered and looked around. He wondered why he needed all this stuff. He carried his bag into the bedroom and threw his clothes into the laundry basket. He went to bed and was soon fast asleep. The next morning, his arm was pretty badly bruised, but he made himself breakfast and sat down at the table to read the news on his phone, absent-mindedly gently rubbing his arm. The phone rang. He looked at the number and did not recognize it. He decided to answer. "Hello," he said. There was silence on the other end of the line. He waited about 10 seconds, then hung up, thinking it was another spam call. He immediately blocked the number, as he did with all spam calls. After breakfast, Kurt decided to go for a run. It had been years since he had run regularly. In the past, he often participated in 5- and 10-kilometer races. He didn't know why he stopped. After not running for a long time, he pulled himself together and ran just 2 miles. He was out of breath when he returned. He was clearly out of shape and decided to run every day. Audra walked into her bedroom around 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. The first thing she noticed was Kurt's absence. She went back to the dining room to see if Kurt had gotten drunk at the bar and fallen asleep there, but he wasn't there. A feeling of horror came over me. Where could he be? She returned to the bedroom and noticed that Kurt's overnight bag was missing. She went to see if the car was there. Of course she wasn't there. She was afraid of this, but expected it. He was damn angry when she left him. She couldn't blame him. She had rejected him for some mediocre sex. Her eyes began to water. She sat down on her side of the bed. What has she done? Chet was so charming that, combined with his power and wealth, coupled with Kurt acting like an ass when she tried to tell him not to ride, led her to leave her husband. Crying, she dialed Kurt's number. He replied, "Hello." "Oh, Kurt, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Sorry. Please. Please come back and get me. We need to talk about this. Please, please forgive me." There was silence on the other end of the line. He hung up. She tried to call back, but he didn't answer. "Oh my God, what should I do now?" She wiped her eyes and looked at her bedside table. Her rings lay there askew, and his wedding ring lay in the middle. "Damn it," she said, and took his ring. When she picked it up, she saw a perfect round imprint on the tree, a symbol of their marriage. She remembered putting that ring on his finger as she said her vows in front of her friends and family. Then she started crying uncontrollably. Probably half an hour later, she entered the dining room, where the others were finishing breakfast. Her eyes were puffy and red. "Audra, are you okay?" asked one of the other directors. She sobbed, sat up straight, and asked, "Can someone give me a ride home after you leave?" They didn't ask questions. They knew what probably happened. They saw Chet hitting on her yesterday. The wife of one of the directors said, "Of course, honey, we can leave when you're ready." Audra felt that she was unhappy with what Chet and she had done. Audra turned and went to gather her things. She put her rings back on. She knew that recovering her marriage will not be so easy. She hoped that Kurt would put it on just as easily as your ring, but I doubted it. She took off her robe and looked at the negligee on her body, the negligee Kurt had bought for her on one of their vacations. How could she do this? What was she thinking? Clearly, she wasn't thinking about Kurt or their marriage. She started crying again as she took a shower, trying to wash off all the dirt she felt. She felt so dirty. After about 20 minutes, she realized she couldn't wash away the guilt. She got out of the shower and dried herself with a towel. She looked at herself in the mirror. At least there was no sign of what she had done. She didn't have to hide from Kurt. She got dressed and packed her things. She didn't even bother putting on makeup. She knew she would cry again. When she walked out into the living room, overnight bag in hand, the couple who had offered her a ride were already waiting. They had already put their suitcases in the car. "Okay, honey," she said, "let's take you home." The ride was mostly quiet. What could they say? What could she say? It was already past noon when she entered their rented apartment. She felt empty. She knew Kurt wasn't there. She went straight to his dresser and opened the drawer. His things were still there. Well, that's a good sign, she told herself. She expected him to have already left. Kurt. After Kurt took a shower to wash off the sweat from his run, he decided to go outside, enjoy the weather, maybe take a walk on the beach. When he got into the car, he put his hand on the steering wheel and quickly pulled it away from her. He was in pain and bruised. He thought about going to the medical center, but being a man, he brushed it off. After walking on the beach, he felt great. It was already lunchtime, and he decided to have a snack. An In-N-Out burger would be nice. He decided to sit inside. He watched people. There was one couple who were about 20 years old, on whom he focused his attention. Why they were so special, he did not know, but he continued to look at them and think about them. They were focused only on each other, oblivious to the fact that he was watching them. He smiled at this. After lunch, he decided to take a ride along the coast. Although the scenery was amazing, something bothered him as he drove through the surrounding hills. Audra. She'd been trying to call Kurt all day, but it kept going to voicemail. She wanted him to call her. It was already 5:00, and she hadn't heard anything from him. She was starting to worry. Will he ever return? She thought about calling one of their friends, but how could she explain why he wasn't with her? Everyone knew it was the weekend when her boss invited them to his home in Rolling Hills. She did so that everyone knew it. She was cleaning. This was her habit when she was nervous, and suddenly she heard the front door open. She walked out of the bathroom and saw Kurt plop down on the couch, pick up the remote, and turn on the TV. "Oh, Kurt, I'm glad you're back. I'm so sorry for what I did. Can you forgive me?" He didn't say a word, just watched TV. "Kurt, will you talk to me?" she said, approaching him. He continued to ignore her. She hated that about him. When he was angry, he would give her the silent punishment. She raised her voice. "Kurt, stop being silent with me. Talk to me." He was just sitting there watching TV. She grabbed the remote from the coffee table and turned off the TV. He looked puzzled and said out loud, "So what now?" and started looking for the remote control. "Kurt, you have to talk to me. I said I was sorry. Please, talk to me." Kurt started looking for the remote control on the couch and even on the floor. Audra was angry that he was playing this game. He kept looking, so she threw the remote on the couch and said, "Here's your damn remote. Grow up, and when you grow up, we need to talk about this." Kurt found the remote on the pillow next to him and looked at it in confusion. He picked it up, shrugged, and turned the TV back on. Audra screamed, "Turn off the damn TV and talk to me." Kurt just sat there, watching TV. Audra stormed out of the room and slammed the bedroom door. Kurt. After an uncomfortable ride through the hills around Los Angeles, he decided it was time to go home. He was tired from being outside all day, so when he walked through the door, he plopped down on the couch, picked up the remote, turned on the TV, and put the remote back. He was watching TV, and suddenly the TV turned off by itself. He looked puzzled and said, "So what now?" and went to look for the remote control. "Where is this remote control?" He looked around on the couch, on the floor. He was nowhere to be found. He looked to the left. There was no remote control. Then he looked to the right, and there he was lying on the pillow, where he had already looked. "What the hell?" he thought. He turned the TV back on and continued watching his show. A minute later, the bedroom door slammed loudly. The wind must have slammed the door, he thought. After a while, Kurt felt hungry, so he ordered pizza delivery. He ordered a small pizza with different ingredients. $25 for a small pizza delivered, and that's even without a tip, he thought. The cost of living here is crazy. Audra. "The bastard just ignored me," she said. She was furious. She should have expected this. He always acted childishly. When they fought, he always played the silent punishment game. Of course, this was much worse than any of their previous fights. She would prefer it if he yelled at her, glared at her, did anything but ignore her. She needed to know that he still cared about her. She started crying again. She had to find a way to fix this. She must have fallen asleep because when she woke up it was already dark. She left the bedroom to check where Kurt was. There was an empty pizza box on the coffee table, but Kurt wasn't there. She checked the bathroom, then looked into the guest bedroom. It was locked. She lowered her head and returned to their bedroom. Kurt. On Monday morning, Kurt got up early. He was determined to start training. He was looking for 5K races to participate in this weekend. He found a Planet Fitness gym close to work. He signed up and started running on the treadmill. After 45 minutes, he showered and got dressed for work. While he was running, he was thinking, why does he live in California? Of course, there are advantages here, but for Kurt, the disadvantages, the high cost of living, traffic jams, and housing prices outweighed the advantages and killed his motivation at work. Kurt worked for Northrop Grumman. He was a technologist. Yes, he was a nerd. Today, he was a nerd who wanted change. He decided that today he would talk to his boss about the transfer. Yes, he may have to take a pay cut to move from California, but the difference in cost of living more than makes up for it. After all, nothing is holding him here. At work, he approached his boss. Sir, I would like to inquire about the possibility of a transfer. What, to another department? No, to another state. I want to get out of this damn place, California. Wow, I would like to leave too, but my wife doesn't allow it. There are housing prices and all these idiots on the roads. My blood pressure would immediately drop 40 points. You're lucky you can leave. He connected Kurt with HR, and by the end of the day, he had opportunities in Wyoming and Montana. Of course, it was necessary to pass an interview, but with a recommendation from the boss and an excellent track record, it was just a formality. After work, he went to the gym again. He needed to work on strength training to improve his endurance. On his way home, he stopped for Thai food so he wouldn't have to cook himself. Arriving home at 7:00, he sat on the sofa and opened the food. He needed something to drink, so he went to the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. Another night in front of the TV, eating takeout. What kind of existence, he thought. Audra. Audra woke up Monday morning and looked at the other side of the bed. She knew he was sleeping in the guest room even before she saw that his side of the bed was untouched. Maybe he'll talk to me this morning, she thought as she headed to the bathroom. In the bathroom, she noticed that his toothbrush, razor, and deodorant were missing. He moved them to the guest bedroom, she thought. She went to the door and knocked. There was no answer, so she tried turning the knob. The door was unlocked, and when she opened it, she saw that he was no longer there. She picked up the phone and tried to call him again, but again to no avail, again to voicemail. She decided to try to talk to him in the evening. At work, she noticed that people behaved differently towards her. Obviously, the events of the weekend did not remain only among the directors. She would have to talk to them about spreading rumors and keeping private lives private. She might be able to stop it from spreading further. The day dragged on endlessly. She really wanted to be home. Kurt usually gets home by 5:30. She wanted to prepare his favorite dish for his arrival. At 4:00, she left work just a little earlier than usual, and by 5:25, she had the chicken Alfredo ready. She rehearsed what she was going to say to him. By 6:00, she began to worry. She went to check his things. It seemed to her that they were all there. It was good he didn't leave. By 6:30, she was starting to get angry. The food was placed in the oven to stay warm. She tried calling him again, to no avail. She could only wait. She constantly looked at her watch. The numbers on the digital display seemed as if they were changing forever. At 7:03, Kurt walked through the door. Audra jumped up and went to the oven to get food. Kurt walked into the kitchen. Audra said, "I made your favorite. I'll put it on the table now." Kurt opened the refrigerator, grabbed a beer, and walked back into the living room. Audra placed the dish on the table and looked at Kurt sitting in front of the TV. He was already eating takeout. "Kurt, I cooked dinner. At least you could come to the table and eat it, even if you don't want to talk to me." There was no reaction. He didn't even look. "Kurt, listen, you have to stop this. You have to say something." Again, no reaction. "Well, to the fuck with you," she said as she threw the chicken Alfredo in the trash and left the room again, slamming the door. She had to find a way to get through to him. What could she do? Half an hour later, she returned to the living room. "Kurt, will you look at me? Will you talk to me?" She begged in a quiet tone. There was no reaction. He just continued to watch TV. She decided to speak to herself. "Listen, Kurt, I know you're angry. I understand. What I did was wrong. I wish I could take it all back, but you know I can't. How can we survive this? I need you to talk to me. Tell me what you want me to do." She debated whether to tell him that she would quit her job, but she had worked hard to achieve her position. She needed this work because it fulfilled her. Kurt continued to ignore her. She was broken. What should she do? Not knowing what to do, she sat down next to him on the sofa. She knew better than to try to hug or kiss him. Past fights had shown her that when he was angry, he didn't want any physical contact. So she just sat next to him on the couch. She sat there for an hour. He laughed occasionally at the comedy show he was watching, but he didn't say a word to her. At 8:30, he turned off the TV, got up, and went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. She just sat on the couch in the dark, tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew she had to give him time. She had wounded him deeply, a wound that would take a long time to heal. She only hoped that he would give her this time. On Tuesday, he was at the gym early again, his mind wandering as he ran on the treadmill. He decided on Wyoming. It would be close enough to Nebraska, his home state, but far enough that he wouldn't be expected to come home often. He valued his privacy. When he arrived at work, he had a message from HR. He was told that both Wyoming and Montana had requested interviews. He decided to pursue both possibilities, although he was leaning toward Wyoming. Not wanting to waste time, he scheduled video interviews for the same day. Given the time difference, he needed to do this as soon as possible. So, at 1:00 he had an interview with Montana. He felt it had gone well, and they had a clear need that he could satisfy. However, Wyoming won it not because of its proximity to its home state, but because they were working on arming hovering drones with lasers. This was something he was strongly attracted to, and his current work experience would be particularly useful here. "When can you start?" they asked him. "Give me this week to hand over my duties and finish some things here. Then I will need a week to move and get settled. Say, the first week of October." "That sounds good," his new boss said. "If you need help with anything, feel free to contact me or my assistant. We will do our best to help you with an easy transition." So throughout that week, Kurt got up early in the morning, went to the gym, and worked late every day to ensure that all his projects were moving forward smoothly. This meant that when Audra made dinner at 5:30 on Tuesday night, he was gone. By Thursday night, she didn't even bother making dinner. He came home late every night, either picking up takeout or eating before coming home. There was still no interaction between them. No matter how many times Audra tried to talk to him, he ignored her. On Friday night, his work colleagues threw him a farewell party at a bar. That night, he returned home at almost 11 and was quite drunk. He fell asleep, falling asleep on the couch. Audra was disappointed and unhappy that Kurt didn't even acknowledge her. She called the woman from work and agreed to go to breakfast. She needed to talk to someone about the situation. She needed help. Her friend was divorced. Perhaps she had some experience in how to save a marriage. Audrey hoped to learn from other people's mistakes, find out what not to do. When Kurt woke up and took his aspirin and drank his first cup of coffee, he was ready to start packing his clothes and other personal items. 2 hours later, he was surprised that all his belongings fit into the car. His lease was still valid for 3 more months, so yes, he would have additional expenses, but the fact that he was leaving this shitty state was worth the expense. Without ceremony, he got into the car and drove out of his house. As he drove out of the complex, he passed a car driving inside. He did not attach any importance to this. He had 2 days of travel. Audra. "I wonder where he's going," she said to herself as she passed Kurt's car driving in the opposite direction. She spoke to the woman, Melanie, about her divorce, what led to it, and how she could save her marriage. Melanie cheated with a family friend. By the time she found out that he knew, he had already left the country. It was that bad. The picture Melanie painted didn't look good. Some men, most men, she said, couldn't handle the thought of his woman giving someone else what he considered his and only his. Come to think of it, Audra would feel the same way if her man cheated. How could she fix this? It is impossible to erase this from his memory. When I entered their apartment, something was wrong. In the living room, she noticed that the TV, DVD player, and game console were missing. "Oh shit," she said and ran into the bedroom. All his clothes and toiletries were gone. She collapsed on the bed. She was late. Less than a week passed, and he left. Not a word, not a note, he just left. She grabbed the phone and started calling all their friends, giving up on trying to hide her adultery. Adultery, she thought. Let's call it what it was, a damn mistake, literally. None of their friends knew where he was and had not heard from him for over a week. She couldn't bring herself to call his parents. They were in Nebraska, and she was sure he didn't go there. What should she do now? She was lost. The work became a challenge. She had to have more than one conversation with colleagues who made offers to her. She told them, without a shadow of a doubt, that their attention was unwanted and would not be tolerated. Despite the rumors that had been circulating about last weekend, she had already earned the nickname Bitch HR Director, whispered behind her back. She was fine with it as long as it stopped the rumors and her co-workers from harassing her. She knew it was useless, but she called Kurt anyway. Of course, voicemail went. She left a message anyway. "Kurt, I saw you leave. I don't know where you're going. I really want you to talk to me. I love you. I'm so sorry for what I did. I don't know what to do to fix this. I'm starting to realize there's nothing I can do. I screwed up. Please call me. I need to hear your voice." She hung up. She didn't end the call with "I love you" as usual. She knew it would sound empty. Kurt made a plan. His plan was to get to St. George, Utah today. Traveling through the desert was tiring, and there was little to see or appreciate, so it would seem like a 10-hour drive when in reality it would take about 7-8 hours. He would find a motel and start the long drive through Utah and into Wyoming early in the morning. While traveling, he thought about his life. Going to college in Arizona was a different experience compared to his Midwest upbringing, but Embry-Riddle really brought out his potential. They made him an ideal candidate for the Northrop Grumman job. When they offered him the job, he was delighted. It was a dream job. The years flew by. In fact, he barely remembered most of them. Most of the time, he knew it was all about work. With California behind him, he was looking forward to starting a new life in a new place, with new challenges, and maybe he would find someone to share his life with. He felt empty in his soul when he thought about it. Audra. On Monday morning, Audra decided to take time off from work and try to speed things up by visiting Kurt at his work. Being a contractor for the military, security did not allow her past the reception desk. When she asked for Kurt, she was told that he was unavailable. Of course, she didn't believe it. They were covering for him. She asked to call his boss. When Mr. Gunheaven came down to the reception room to talk to her, he was a little puzzled. "How can I help you, Mrs. Bryant?" "I need to talk to Kurt. I know he's been avoiding me, but I really need to talk to him." I'm a little puzzled. Kurt doesn't work here anymore. Friday was his last day of work here." "Did he quit?" "No, he requested a transfer last Monday. He said he wanted to leave this hellhole of California." "So where did he go?" I don't think I should give you this information. If he didn't talk to you about it, there was a good reason for it. You are the HR director. You must understand this." "So he left California?" "I probably shouldn't have even said that," he said. She realized she wouldn't get any more information from him, so she said, "Well, thanks. If you talk to him, please tell him I want to talk to him." She saw that he understood that they had problems and she wanted to try to solve them. As she walked out to the car, she scanned the parking lot in case she was being told a lie to cover for Kurt. After looking around for a minute or two, she realized with disappointment that Kurt's car was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Haven was telling her the truth. Kurt, the Sunday drive through Utah and into Wyoming was incredible. The scenery was breathtaking. He had never driven through Utah before, always flying home from Los Angeles for the holidays. He'll have to spend more time here now that he's in the same state. Finding a hotel in Cheyenne was not difficult. It was the end of September, and the tourist season was already ending. He decided to stay at the Town Place Suites by Marriott. This gave him time to find a nice townhouse or apartment while still being able to cook his own food. There was also a gym there so he could continue his training. He needed to look into changing his Planet Fitness membership to Cheyenne. You may just have to cancel your membership and start a new one. This reminded him that he would need to open a new bank account and inform his work about the automatic transfer change. Of course, you will need to change your driver's license. He started making a list. On Monday, he started completing his to-do list. The DMV was about what he expected. You take the number and wait. Luckily, it didn't take as long as he thought. They were quite effective. Opening a new bank account was also easier than he expected. He was even given a debit card the same day. He will wait for the checks before closing the California accounts. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he had completed all the items on the list. He decided to stop by his new place of work and introduce himself to his new boss. His boss was extremely helpful, even giving advice on which areas of the city to avoid and where to look for good accommodation. After talking with him for half an hour, he thought they would get along great. Wyoming seemed like a great change in his life, perhaps even a permanent location. Weeks passed, Kurt adjusted to his new job, and Audra continued to try to find him, but to no avail. Then Audra decided to take drastic measures. She picked up the phone and called Kurt's parents. She was sure that he told them all the details of her obvious betrayal. They were church people. She was sure that if they talked to her at all, she would receive a lot of reproaches. "Hello, Carol, this is Audra," she said hesitantly. "Carol, why is it so official? You know you can call me Mom." Audra was puzzled. Had Kurt not called and told his parents for a whole month? "Sorry, Mom. How are you doing?" "Fine. So, how do you like Wyoming?" So that's where he is, Audra thought. "Not bad," Audra said, and then took a chance and asked, "What did Kurt say about that?" "Oh, you know Kurt, he's not a man of many words. He said he was glad to get out of California. I was surprised you didn't mind it." "Well, we discussed it. I think you'll get used to the Midwest. Give it a chance." "Okay, thank you, Mom. I have to go, but I'll be in touch." Audra hung up. She was confused. He left without saying a word to her, but seemed to be hiding it from his parents. Was there any hope left? If he didn't tell his parents about the details, then maybe he was willing to work on their relationship. How could they do this if he didn't answer her calls? Well, at least now she knew where he was. She decided to buy a TracFone phone and call Kurt from it. Maybe after some time had passed, he would be ready to talk to her. She immediately went to the store and bought it. He must answer, she told herself. She dialed his number. "Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The number you dialed has been changed, disconnected, or is no longer in service. Please check the number and dial it again." She looked at the phone to make sure she had dialed the right number. Yes, it was Kurt's number, at least it used to be. Damn, he must have changed his number. So what's now? She couldn't call her mother-in-law again and ask for a new number. Well, she knew he was in Wyoming and had a work transfer, so let's start there. She went to the Northrop Grumman website and looked up information for the state of Wyoming. They had a branch in Cheyenne. Great, the capital, how to find him among 100,000 people. She then thought about hiring a private investigator to find him. But what will it do? Because she needs to talk to him. She decided to take a week off and find him on her own. Kurt. At work at Kerr's, everything was going great, and he was starting to feel like part of the team. It was the end of October, and the Human Resources Department informed me that I needed to fill out forms to open new benefits. While reviewing his benefits, he noticed that instead of being on a single-person plan, he was on a family plan. There must be some kind of mistake, Kurt thought. He immediately made changes to one person's plan for the following year and requested a refund. HR looked into it and said that they approved the plan last fall and that they couldn't do anything because it was his decision. Kurt was puzzled and absent-mindedly rubbed his palm. He looked at the hand he was rubbing. On the palm, under the skin, there was a circle of hard tissue the size of a nickel coin. I should check my hand, he thought. Audra. 3 weeks after the conversation with Kurt's mom, Audra sat in the car in front of his work, waiting for his car to pull out of the parking lot. At 5:30, she spotted her and followed him. He drove to the Planet Fitness gym and went inside. Does she want to go there and meet him? What if he ignores her again and just walks away without giving her a chance to follow him? Then she will lose the chance to find out where he lives. She also won't be able to talk to him like a normal husband and wife. No, it's better to wait. So, an hour later, Kurt walked out to his car, and Audra followed him to the hotel where he was staying. She was angry that he left her and was also worried about how to approach the matter. How can she do this? Just go knock on his door, saying hi and can we talk? She sat in the car, going through all the scripts. He could get aggressive, but that wasn't Kurt's style. He could start screaming and cursing. She would deserve it, and in fact, it would be better than what he did at home. Maybe he'll use the silent punishment again and just won't talk to her. They needed to discuss this. She made a huge mistake. She knew it even while it was happening, but the fact that Kurt didn't listen to her and instead went riding to show himself off to Chet irritated her greatly. He simply could not act calmly, jeopardizing her position at work. By the time she realized she was making a big mistake, she was already in bed with Chet. At this point, the damage had already been done. Finally, she worked up the courage to go to his door and ring the bell. She heard Kurt inside approaching the door. She knew he was looking through the peephole. After 10 seconds, he walked away from the door. She started knocking and begging him to open the door and talk to her. There was no answer. Now she was angry. She started banging on the door, ringing the bell and screaming for Kurt to open the door. The neighbors from the next room opened the door and looked at her. She stopped. "What are you doing?" they asked in an accusatory tone. "I'm trying to get my husband to open the door and talk to me," she exclaimed. "Husband? Kurt lives here. He is not married. I think you have the wrong number." "He is married. We've been married for 3 years." The wife of one of the neighbors said very confidently, "We invited him to dinner a couple of times, and he categorically stated that he was not married. He dated a girl in college for a while, but it didn't work out. I don't know what kind of nonsense you're trying to pull off, but if you don't leave, we'll call the police." Audra stood there in shock. He told everyone he was alone. How could he? She thought. Kurt. Inside the apartment, Kurt had just gotten home, tossed his gym clothes into the washing machine, and put on some sweatpants to relax. Then the doorbell rang. He walked up and looked through the peephole. "This is strange," he said to himself. There was no one there. A few minutes later, he heard neighbors talking on the sidewalk. It sounded like an argument. They were a nice couple, and he hoped they would work things out. As he stood there, he absent-mindedly rubbed his palm, feeling a circle under his skin. Audra. The police won't help here, Audra told herself as she walked back to the car. She needed to find a way to get Kurt to talk to her. As she sat in the car, she thought about their time together. If she hadn't been so clumsy, they would never have met. She thought about their dates and how 3 months passed before they made love. Why the hell did she do what she did? She knew Kurt and his Midwestern values would never allow that. Chet was so charismatic and powerful. It was as if she had no control. At least that's what she told herself, although she knew it wasn't true. She knew it was wrong. She knew, deep down, that it would ruin their marriage, but Chet was so convincing, and he had a point to prove after Kurt showed off his superior writing skills. Damn it, Kurt, why did you have to provoke him? She knew she was shifting the blame from herself to Kurt. She also knew that despite her words, "You don't own me," it wasn't what they both thought. They were one, and yes, he owned her as much as she owned him. They were each other's most treasured. She started crying again. After 10 minutes, she started the car and drove to another hotel. The night was restless. She had nightmares about Kurt disowning her, saying that he never really loved her, that she was just a good piece of body to him. In the morning, she decided to go to his work and talk to him there. Kurt. At 10:00, he received a call from the administrator who said that someone in the reception wanted to see him. I wonder who it could be, he thought. When he approached the receptionist, she said, "This woman asked for you," pointing to the furniture in the reception area. He looked and saw no one there. He laughed and said, "Funny, you caught me, Chloe. You make fun of the new guy and make him feel like he's part of the team." Then he turned and walked back to his desk, rubbing his palm as he always did. Chloe looked puzzled as Kurt walked away. The woman walked up to the reception desk as Kurt was talking. She stood 5 feet away from him when he turned and walked away. Audra stood there in shock. Kurt ignored her completely, not even acknowledging her presence in the same room in front of another person. Chloe apologized to the woman, who explained that she was his wife, but they had a big fight. Chloe, not knowing what to do, called the HR specialist. When he went out to the waiting room, he secretly assessed the beautiful woman in the waiting room. He didn't like that he couldn't get a good look at her. As an HR professional, he had to set the right example. He wondered how many of these women he could ask out if he didn't have to be the right HR person. "Hello, I'm Mr. Bella Miller. How can I help you, miss?" "I want to talk to my husband, but he doesn't want to talk to me." Puzzled, he looked at the administrator. She came to see Kurt Bryant, but when he came out, he completely ignored her and walked away. Now he was really puzzled. Kurt recently talked to him about his benefits. He said that he was given benefits for his family, although in fact he was alone. Kurt told me specifically that he's single. In fact, he changed his benefits to reflect this. "Are you recently divorced?" "No, we had a fight and he transferred here." Do not know what to say. "Talk to him for me, please," she begged. "Let me talk to him," he said. When he talked to Kurt, he was adamant that he was single. He returned to the woman in the waiting room and told her that Kurt was sure that he did not have a wife. The woman insisted that she was his wife. She showed him her driver's license. It did have the same last name as Kurt and an address in Los Angeles. She was so persistent that he decided to call the Los Angeles office. Mr. Haven said Kurt was married, at least while he worked there. Audra actually came to him after Kurt transferred. He described Audra, and her description matched the woman in the waiting room, and Kurt's previous address matched what was on her driver's license. "Miss, leave your number with Chloe, and I will try to look into this. Are you staying in the city?" he asked, thinking to himself, "A woman who looks like that must be a real bitch, or have done something very bad if he wants to get rid of her." Mr. Miller checked a few more details and was puzzled when he spoke to Kurt again about his marital status. He was a good judge of character and could read body language well enough to believe that Kurt was telling the truth, or so he thought. Then he decided to call his psychologist friend. Northrop Grumman was a defense contractor, and it was important to make sure employees were mentally stable. He had free time the next day, so Mr. Miller arranged for Kurt to visit him. Then he called Audra. "Mrs. Royce Bryant, the doctor has determined that he has selective amnesia. What happened just before he was transferred here?" Audra fell silent. He could tell that it was something big and that she didn't want to discuss it. "Perhaps it is better if I talk to you personally about this. Sometimes it's good to have someone to lean on." Besides, he thought, he could use some time with this beautiful woman. They met at a restaurant near work. He explained to her what the doctor had said. He then asked, what happened that could make him forget about marrying such a beautiful woman? She deflected, saying they had a huge fight about a week before he left for Wyoming. It had to be something traumatic to cause amnesia. And then she broke down. "I cheated on him with my boss," she finally admitted. At that moment, Audra heard Kurt's voice. She heard him from across the restaurant, which was not too densely packed. She turned to see him talking to the hostess. I ordered takeout. Your name? Kurt Bryant. I'll check your order, Mr. T's Bryant, she said and went into the kitchen. Audra, seeing a chance to talk to him, stood up and walked towards him. Kurt, oh dear, I'm so sorry, forgive me. He stood there, ignoring her, not even looking in her direction. Kurt, she said, grabbing his hand. The hand felt lifeless. She pulled it, but his body did not react. She stood right in front of him, and he continued to ignore her. She started screaming at him and stomping her feet. The hostess returned with Kurt's food and addressed Audra. Miss, what's your problem? This is my husband, and he doesn't want to talk to me. All this time, Kurt stood without emotion. He noticed his food and asked, Is this my food? The hostess hesitated and said, Yes. I've already paid for it. Audra still held him in one hand, and he took the food with his other hand. Thank you, he said to the hostess and turned to leave. He was actually pulling Audra's hand. He walked to the car, put the food on the roof, pressed the unlock button, opened the door, and hit her with the door. All this time, Audra begged Kurt to tell her something. When the door hit her, she let go of his hand, and he took the food and got into the car, blocking the door. She started knocking on the window, but Kurt just started the car and drove away. Audra had to quickly step back to prevent him from running over her foot. As Kurt drove away, she fell to the ground. All this time, Mr. Miller watched what was happening. He couldn't believe it. He walked over to Audra, helped her up, and returned with her to the restaurant. They discussed what happened. Both were surprised by his complete unawareness of her presence. I'm going to refer him to a psychologist again. Can I ask you to send me pictures of you and Kurt together? Of course, I have a lot of them. I can forward them from my phone. Okay, send them to my phone, and I'll give them to the doctor. Do you have a photo of just you? Maybe a more personal one that might jog his memory? Oh yeah, this is a very personal photo, Audra said reluctantly. Perhaps this is something that will help him remember, he said, thinking, and I wouldn't mind adding it to my personal collection. Kurt. Kurt was called back into Mr. Miller's office and referred to a psychologist. He was puzzled by the need for another visit. Mr. Bryant, please sit down. May I ask why another assessment? There is a problem. Just a follow-up check. It won't take long, he said. Mr. Miller told him about the events of the previous day in the restaurant. He also sent him photographs. Do you know Miss Audra Jackson, using her maiden name? No, I haven't met anyone with that name, Kurt replied, rubbing his palm. Can you look at this photo and tell me what you see? The photo was of Kurt and Audra, taken at a restaurant shortly after they started dating. This is a photo of me sitting in a restaurant I frequented in the Los Angeles area. Who else is in the photo? There are a few people in the background, but I don't know who they are, just some customers. The doctor looked at the photo. Kurt was clearly sitting at the table with his arm around the woman Mr. Miller said was Kurt's wife. He showed him another photo. This is me on the beach in the gazebo. How did you get these photos? Is the government watching me? Oh no, I got them from Mr. Miller. He got them from your friend in Los Angeles. He showed him a few more photos, and the reaction was the same. Although his wife was in all the photos, he did not see her. He was starting to get a little irritated, rubbing his palm all the time. One more, Mr. Bryant, he said, showing him a photograph of his wife in a negligee, sitting on the bed. This photo appears to be of an expensive bedroom, possibly a hotel. Okay, Kurt, thanks, that's all. Releasing him, Kurt stood up and left, returning to work. When Mr. Miller was informed of the outcome of the meeting, he asked, Should I be concerned about his work here? No, I do not think so. It appears to be fully functional. Other than blocking everything related to his wife, there shouldn't be any problem. In the future, he may remember these memories, but he may not. Those years with her were simply filled with his work life. However, if he starts to remember or there are problems related to his marriage, please contact me. Mr. Miller called Audra. Mrs. Bryant, I talked to the doctor. Photos didn't help. This is selective amnesia. He forgot about you and your marriage. Then Audra remembered what Kurt had told her before she left that bedroom, before she left their marriage to sleep with her boss. She didn't even say goodbye, she just hung up. Kurt told her that she could forget about their marriage, and he himself forgot about their marriage. Finally realizing that she had ruined her marriage and needed to get back to work, she began to prepare to head back to Los Angeles. As she got ready, she thought about the end of her marriage and her job. She was sad about her marriage and had mixed feelings about her job. She needed to keep working, at least for now. She needed money to live, and her position as HR director brought her a good salary. She knew, however, that she would no longer be able to treat it with the same zeal. As she was paying at the hotel, she opened her Gucci bag to take out her car keys. There, at the bottom of the bag, was Kurt's ring. She brought it in the hope that they would make peace, and he would wear it again. What will she do with him now? She'll decide that later. As she began the long walk home, with tears in her eyes, she said out loud, "I hope you find happiness, Kurt." About a year later, Audra, Chet Haverson said, "Why do you look so sad?" "It'll be 1 year this weekend," she said quietly. "I understand," he said, and he really did. Since returning from vacation, Audra has been distant. Chet tried to cheer her up, even offered to repeat that fateful night. She categorically refused and even told him that his attempts were unwelcome and further efforts to create anything other than a professional relationship would result in charges of sexual harassment. He took this warning seriously and made no further attempts to pester her. A week later, Audra filed for divorce. She knew that the marriage was over, but she hoped that Kurt would suddenly understand and remember the good times they spent together. Speaking to Mr. Dodd Miller, she learned that he still had not shown any signs of acknowledging their marriage. When the documents arrived by registered mail, Kurt opened the envelope out of curiosity, but after reading the first lines, his mind went blank, and he threw the envelope with its contents into the trash. He then absent-mindedly rubbed the palm of his left hand. 90 days passed and Audra was with her lawyer before the judge. She had the medical report as well as Mr. Miller's report, which made it clear to everyone present that there was no reason not to grant the divorce. She will never forget her marriage to Kurt. Hopefully she can find someone else and learn from her past mistakes. This weekend, Chet was in his stable telling his groom to saddle up a thoroughbred horse. The groom looked surprised. Chet didn't like riding this horse. It was too restive. He preferred the quarter horse, a much lighter horse. However, Audra mentioned the finalization of her divorce, and he remembered how her husband controlled this animal with such ease. He also remembered how he performed that weekend. He needed to prove to himself that he was not number two, especially in front of a man who abandoned such a beautiful woman. He had been on the trails for about half an hour, when suddenly the horse reared up and threw Chet off. Chet fell hard, but as he lay on the ground, he felt a burning sensation in his left arm, and, raising his hand to his chest, he saw the horse rear up. He woke up in the hospital 3 days later. His arm was bandaged, and he was confused, trying to remember what happened. The nurse, noticing his activity, entered the room. "Mr. Haverson, how are you feeling? You are in the hospital. Did you have an accident? I'll call the doctor, and she'll explain everything to you." He didn't even have a chance to answer her or ask questions before she was already gone. He tried to remember what happened. He didn't remember much. He began to assess his condition. His arm still hurts. He remembered this part. His back hurt, but other than that he didn't feel too bad. Then the doctor came in. She was a beautiful red-haired woman, early 40, with a serious but sympathetic expression. "Mr. Haverson, my name is Dr. Pecton. How are you feeling?" "My arm hurts, and my back also hurts, but otherwise it's fine." "You fell off your horse hard. What do you remember?" "I rode a thoroughbred horse through the hills around my estate," he said, trying to impress the beautiful doctor. "Something spooked my horse, and he threw me off. I remember falling to the ground, then my arm hurt. That's all I remember." We'll discuss your hand in a minute. Can you tell me how your body feels? Where else do you have pain? My back hurts, but I hit the ground hard. Mr. Haverson. Call me Chet, please, he said. There was no reason not to move on to names. Okay, Chet, I need you to tell me if you can feel your toes. Chet thought for a moment, then panic began to overwhelm him. He couldn't feel his toes, or his feet, or even his legs. He raised his head to see if they were there. Yes, they were there, but he couldn't feel them, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't move them. Your horse accidentally stepped on your pelvis with its front hoof. You have internal injuries, and your pelvic bone is broken. If it weren't for your neighbor who was on the trail seeing what happened and calling an ambulance immediately, you probably would have died from internal bleeding. Chet was shocked. The doctor continued, Your spinal cord has been damaged, and you have lost all sensation and function in the lower half of your body. Chet felt dizzy. The doctor continued to tell him about his condition and prognosis, but he did not listen to her. He was paralyzed from the waist down. That's all he could think about. Kurt, said Mr. Pay Miller, you've been smiling all week. Is there a reason? Maybe you remembered some happy moments from the past. No, I don't really know why, but life just seems so great right now. There's no reason to walk around sullenly. It's a sunny day, and everything has been great this week. Kurt loved his job. He has been working on a personal project for the last year. This concerned the drone remote control system. They tested it last weekend, and even half a country away, it could control drones equipped with lasers. The laser could hit a target from 3,000 feet with millimeter accuracy. Use in military and law enforcement agencies was virtually unlimited. This will give us a huge advantage over our enemies. He stood talking to Mr. Miller, absent-mindedly rubbing the palm of his left hand, feeling a circle under his skin. I'm happy for you, Kurt. Keep it up in the same spirit. 3 weeks later, Chet was at home, trying to get used to his new life. He had to move into one of the bedrooms on the first floor, since his master bedroom was upstairs. His wheelchair did not allow him to stay there. He also had to get used to having a colostomy bag and all the new routines and demands that were placed on his life. Life, he thought. What is my life like now? His groom, cook, and now nurse were very sympathetic to his new situation, but they were simply paid employees. Apart from a few neighbors and the person who found him and called an ambulance, he had no other friends to visit him. Did he have real friends, or were they all just acquaintances? Thinking about this, looking out the window at the hills, his groom came in with a worried expression on his face. What's happened? Chet asked. Sir, I think I need to call the vet tomorrow. Why? There is a wound there that, despite all the ointments I applied, does not heal. Here, let me zoom in so you can see it. There was an obvious wound in the photo, a perfect circle the size of a nickel. Chet opened his left hand and showed it to the groom. Both looked surprised. On his palm was a perfect circle the size of a nickel coin. They didn't know what to think about it. That night, as Chet was trying to get to bed in his wheelchair, he took off his watch and put it on the nightstand. There, something caught his attention. There was a print on the nightstand. He just looked at it, then looked at his hand.